Welcome to the Savvy Podcasting for Entrepreneurs podcast, a place for podcasters to learn what's actually working in the world of podcasting and how to use their podcast to generate consistent leads in their business. I'm your host, Jenny, and I'm so excited you're here.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be chatting all about how to manage multiple podcasts, because I know that is something some of you might be doing. And I know you're also probably like, wait, hold up. I can barely manage one podcast. How am I supposed to manage multiple? And if you're content with your one podcast and you don't plan on starting another, or you're not going to become a podcast manager or whatever that may be, that's totally fine, but you may want to skip this episode if that's the case, because it's not going to be applicable to you. But anyway, this episode is for my multi-passionate podcasters who want to have multiple shows and any podcast managers out there that tune into the show, because I imagine there are some of you as well. It's not just people who have their own podcasts, it's people who manage podcasts too. So, as you probably already know, keeping up with just one podcast is a lot of work. So if you want to keep up with multiple, especially if you're not just managing your podcast for clients and you're actually doing the recording and the production process yourself, then it's super crucial to have an extremely organized and streamlined process. So I'm going to give you 4 ways to easily manage multiple podcasts without losing your mind. First up, you want to have a content calendar. So I personally use Airtable for this. It's a great way to keep track of all my ideas. It's basically like Google Sheets on steroids if you're not familiar with that. I can have my link if you want to check out Airtable. If you go to savvypodcastingforentrepreneurs.com/Airtable, you can sign up for Airtable and check it out. But it is basically, like I said, Google Sheets on steroids. It is awesome. One of my favorite tools for keeping track of content, for keeping track of stats, for keeping track of anything like that that needs to be in like the spreadsheet form. Super great for that. So if you want to check it out, like I said, go to savvypodcastingforentrepreneurs.com/Airtable. But having a content calendar wherever you have it is super crucial. This helps you keep track of everything. Even if you just have one podcast, you should have a content calendar. But if you have multiple, you should definitely have content calendars, because there's so much content that you're going to be putting out there. You want to make sure that you're maximizing your efforts and time. And when you have a content calendar full of amazing ideas for your podcast, that is going to make it so much easier for you to come up with content, to create that content, to know how each episode's performing. And I also like to keep track of what ads I'm going to be putting in those episodes as well. So I have a space for that. So it's just a really essential thing for you to have, no matter if you have one podcast or several. So that is super crucial. And like I said, it helps you keep on track, make sure you're not missing any weeks because you just don't have a topic in mind. I like to sit down and just create like a whole year's worth of topics. I don't actually record and edit and all that stuff at that point, but I just create the topic ideas. And then I always know I'm going to be recording each and every week. So that is number 1. Number 2 is to utilize some type of project management system. This could be a true project management tool, ClickUp or Asana, or you can even use something like Airtable if you want to do that. I definitely recommend like a true project management tool, because there's so many moving parts of the podcast, as you already know, especially have multiple podcasts. There's even more moving parts to keep track of with recording and editing and creating graphics, creating audiograms, creating the social media posts. There's just so much to keep track of. So having a project management system with all those tasks for each episode in there makes it so much easier, so you don't lose your mind and forget where you left off, because you could be editing an episode for podcast A, but then podcast B, you're on a totally different step, which is completely fine, but it can be a lot if you don't have some sort of project management system to keep track of everything. So definitely recommend that. I'll leave links to all of the different tools in the show notes. So I can leave my ClickUp link, my Asana link, and also Airtable again. But yeah, those are the kind of options I recommend. You only need ClickUp or Asana. You don't need both. Just pick whatever works for you. There's even Trello. So those are the different options there. So yeah, I definitely recommend having a project management tool. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard to keep up with everything. Hey there. I just wanted to briefly pause this episode to tell you a little bit about the Profitable Podcast Workflow. As a podcast agency owner and someone who currently has 2 podcasts, this one you're listening to right now, plus Virtual Summit Secrets with my biz bestie, Lindsay. And I'm also about to launch a third podcast in the next couple months. I have created systems and processes to really help manage your podcast without the overwhelm, because when you have multiple podcasts, it can get overwhelming. In the Profitable Podcast Workflow, I give you the exact tools that you need to create a solid workflow that works for you and not against you. So if you want to grab the Profitable Podcast Workflow, you can go to savvypodcastingforentrepreneurs.com/workflow and get in the program. It's just a quick little digital product, nothing crazy. It has templates. There's a couple guides, just making your podcast production super seamless and easy. And you can start implementing within an hour. So super quick and easy. Okay, now let's get back into the episode. So, number 3, figuring out a good batching schedule. So, if you know me, been listening for a while, you know I'm a huge proponent of batching. It is like my favorite thing ever because it just makes things so much easier and prevents overwhelm. It keeps you from getting burnt out and make sure that you're always putting out content, because you don't have an excuse because you always have a new episode ready to go. So batching is just amazing. And you can batch your episodes like actual recordings. You can batch your content planning. You can batch your social media for your podcast. You can batch graphic creation for your podcast. All those different things, you can figure out a batching schedule. And I think it's really crucial to have a batching schedule, especially when you have multiple podcasts. Because like I said earlier, you're in different places in the production process with each one. So if you batched your recordings for podcast A one week, and then the following week or the week after, or whatever you want to do, you can batch podcast B's recordings. And same with the content, like creation for social and graphics. You could probably batch those as well if you wanted to, if you wanted to get really like nitty gritty with it. But I definitely recommend batching your recordings at the very least when you have multiple podcasts. Otherwise, you're going to be recording 2 or more podcast episodes every week, and you're going to be so burnt out and not consistent, which defeats the purpose of having a podcast, because you really need to be consistent to see results. And then lastly, number 4, outsource if you can. So if you have multiple podcasts, obviously let's double the recording, double the production. Obviously, you can't outsource the recording because you are the host of the show, but outsource parts that you can. So if editing is not something you love and you already edit one show and you don't want to edit the second, outsource it. Or maybe social media is something you're not very good at and you just want to grow your show and not focus on the social media aspect. You don't care about editing. You'll do that all day long and recording, but you want to outsource the social media or the graphic creation or the audiograms or even the show notes. That can be something that a lot of people don't really like doing either. So just outsource if you are able to, because it really helps lessen your workload, since you already doubled that by having a second or third, maybe even third podcast. So yeah, I definitely recommend outsourcing if that is a possibility for you. You can start with outsourcing just one thing. You can outsource the entirety of it other than recording. It's up to you and your budget. But yeah, I definitely recommend it if you can. And while keeping up with multiple podcasts may not be for everyone, it really doesn't have to be impossible either. And if you just utilize those 4 tips, you can certainly make it doable to have 1, 2, maybe even 3 podcasts. So if you currently manage multiple podcasts or you plan to, I'd love to know your best tip for keeping it all together. So make sure to shoot me a DM at Jenny Suneson on Instagram. So that's JennySuneson on Instagram, and let me know. And that is it for today's episode. So if you guys want to check out the show notes, you can head to savvypodcastingforentrepreneurs.com, and I'll see you in the next episode.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast player like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Stitcher, and leave a review. You can find us at savvypodcastingforentrepreneurs.com and on Facebook at Savvy Podcasting for Entrepreneurs and Instagram at Savvy Podcasting. Make sure to join our free Facebook community for podcasters by going to savvypodcastingforentrepreneurs.com/community and join in on the exclusive community just for Savvy Podcasting for Entrepreneurs listeners. I'll see you there.